Hello there. It is so incredibly good to sit down with you today.
It really is.
Seriously, how have you been doing? Like actually doing? Pull up a chair, grab your coffee, your tea, your matcha, whatever you're drinking right now, and just get comfortable.
Yeah, settle in.
Think of this as us just hanging out at a cozy little cafe table, just catching up. Because we have put together a completely custom deep dive for you today.
A really fun one, too.
Oh, absolutely. And I really want to jump straight into something that is, well, it's probably sitting in your pocket on your phone, and it is actively tormenting you right now.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going.
You know it. I'm talking about a group chat. Because, I mean, I currently have a 57 message thread on my phone right now that is actively eroding 3 of my closest friendships.
Oh, wow. Yikes. 57.
57. And the stakes. We are literally just trying to figure out where to eat pizza on a Saturday.
That is just, well, it's the universal modern tragedy, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, we possess these pocket-sized supercomputers, right? They're capable of instantaneous global communication.
Right.
Yet organizing, like, 4 adults to consume carbohydrates in the same room at the same time is functionally impossible.
It is. It's beyond impossible. And usually when we look at systems like, say, engineering or medical diagnostics, there's this expectation of precision, right? Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows the jagged line, the doctor points to it, and you fix it.
Exactly. It's objective.
Right. But then you step into the landscape of human communication, specifically the pragmatics of making social plans, and that x-ray machine just shatters.
Oh, completely.
It's incredibly murky. Deciding between a burger or a pizza should take 5 minutes. Literally 5 minutes. Instead, it turns into this bizarre 30-minute psychological standoff where absolutely nothing gets decided.
Which is exactly why we're analyzing this today, because we aren't just looking at polite vocabulary or, basic English phrases here.
No, it goes way deeper.
The material we're synthesizing today uses these everyday interactions as, well, like a Trojan horse.
Ooh, I like that. A Trojan horse.
Yeah, it's a way to explore the psychology of human negotiation, the evolutionary biology of group harmony, and just the immense cognitive load of navigating hidden expectations.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if we're going to understand the psychology of planning, we really have to start with the single most dangerous sentence in the English language.
Oh, man, yes.
4 little words that instantly derail any negotiation, and we all say it. I'm fine with anything.
Dude, absolute worst.
Why do we say this when we are, in fact, not fine with anything?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the concept of social risk
Okay.
and the evolutionary desire to preserve tribal harmony. Because on the surface, I'm fine with anything sounds like the ultimate cooperative statement, right?
It sounds super chill.
Exactly. You're signaling to the group, I am low maintenance, I am a team player.
Right.
But human communication is rarely surface level. Very often, this phrase is actually a defensive mechanism.
A defense mechanism.
Yeah, it translates to something more like, I absolutely have a preference, but I don't want to take the social risk of asserting it just in case someone disagrees with me.
Wait, let me push back on that a bit.
Sure.
Aren't there people who are just genuinely easygoing? I mean, sometimes I really honestly don't care if we get Thai food or Mexican food. I'm just hungry.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the tricky part. The problem is the duality of the phrase.
Okay, duality. How so?
Well, if you genuinely have zero preference and your internal state will be perfectly content regardless of the outcome,
Right.
then you're exhibiting flexibility.
Okay, flexibility is good.
Flexibility is great, but the danger arises because the exact same phrase is used by people exhibiting passivity.
Ah, passivity.
Right, and passivity means you hold a firm preference, but you actively avoid the vulnerability required to state it out loud.
So you're secretly hoarding an opinion.
Exactly. You are forcing the other person to guess what you want. Sociologists actually often refer to this as a collision between ask culture and guess culture.
Right. Okay, I've heard of this. Ask culture being where people feel comfortable just, stating what they want directly. And guess culture being where you're expected to kind of read the room and anticipate needs without anyone actually saying them out loud.
Precisely. So when a guess culture person says, I'm fine with anything, they're actually testing you.
Oh, wow. Testing you.
Yeah. They are expecting you to know them well enough to pick the thing they secretly want. It's honestly a covert form of control.
A covert form of control.
Yeah.
That is, wow.
Yeah, because you're making the other person do all the heavy lifting, right? All the cognitive labor of making the decision.
Well, you just sit back.
Exactly. while you retain the right to judge the outcome.
Oh, man. Retaining the right to judge. It's like setting up a trap door for your friends.
That is exactly what it is.
You think you're walking on solid ground with an easygoing person. You say, great, you're fine with anything. Let's get Italian.
And then...
And the moment you commit, they hit you with the fallout. They look a little disappointed and go, oh, Italian. I thought we were getting sushi.
Every time.
And suddenly, you're the bad guy for not reading their mind.
And this creates a vacuum where resentment just grows because the conflict hasn't been avoided at all, which was their goal, right?
Right. They thought they were being nice.
But it's just been delayed. And now it's compounded by this illusion that agreement had already been reached.
Oh, that is so frustrating.
So the person who made the decision feels manipulated, and the passive person feels misunderstood.
It's a complete lose-lose. So, okay, how do we dismantle that trapdoor?
Yeah.
Because if stating our raw demands feels too aggressive, but being passive leads to all this resentment,
Yeah.
we have to find a way to negotiate preferences naturally.
Exactly.
And this is where the specific language we use completely alters how our brain processes the interaction.
Completely.
Let's look at the subtle art of the gentle suggestion. There are these two phrases that seem identical on paper, but they carry entirely different psychological payloads, right?
Yes.
How about versus what about?
This is honestly a masterclass in linguistic pragmatics.
It really is.
Now, obviously, native speakers interchange these constantly without consulting a grammar textbook.
Right. Nobody's diagramming sentences at brunch.
Exactly. You can say, how about the beach? Or what about the beach? And the fundamental data is the exact same.
Right. Beach,
Yeah.
sand, water.
But the human brain is a highly, highly sensitive instrument when it comes to conversational momentum.
Momentum. That's the exact word for it.
Yeah.
Because if we're sitting around staring blankly at each other with a wide open Saturday, and I say, how about the beach? It feels like I'm generating an idea out of thin air. It's an initiation.
Exactly. How about Devacrin operates as a conversation starter? You are establishing a new baseline.
Okay, a baseline.
But consider how your brain reacts if someone has already suggested something.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say I suggest going to the park. If you respond with, what about the beach? You are executing a pivot. What about inherently acknowledges the previous suggestion, but introduces a counterproposal into the existing architecture of the conversation.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's the difference between opening a brand new document versus editing a document someone else already wrote.
That is a perfect analogy.
But for you listening right now, why should you care about this micro distinction? Because understanding this momentum is the ultimate tool for avoiding the I'm fine with anything trap.
It really is.
These phrases allow you to float a concept and, test the waters without triggering the other person's defensive reflexes. You aren't forcing an idea on them. You are inviting collaboration.
You are creating psychological safety.
Psychological safety.
Yeah, in negotiation theory, this is known as avoiding anchoring bias.
Anchoring bias, okay.
Right. If you declare a strong, rigid demand right out of the gate, you anchor the conversation, and the other person immediately feels boxed in.
They feel trapped.
Exactly. Gentle suggestions keep the architecture fluid.
Fluid is good.
But of course, a negotiation cannot remain fluid forever.
Right. Eventually, we have to actually go somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Eventually, someone has to state a tangible desire.
Which brings us to the assertiveness spectrum. And this is where I think a lot of people just freeze up because they confuse being assertive with being authoritarian.
Oh, constantly.
Think about it this way. If we're trying to plan a weekend and I look at you right now and just say, I want to go to the beach, how does that actually make you feel as my friend?
Honestly, neurobiologically speaking, it triggers a very subtle threat response in the amygdala.
Wait, seriously? Just saying, I want.
Yes, because I want is an absolute declarative. In the context of collaborative social planning, it doesn't acknowledge the existence of other variables or, more importantly, the other person's autonomy.
It just sounds like an instruction.
Exactly. Linguists talk about this concept called negative face.
Negative face.
Yeah, which is our fundamental human desire to not be imposed upon, to have freedom of action.
Oh, nobody likes being told what to do.
Right. So when you say, I want to go to the beach, you are threatening my negative face. You are imposing your will on my schedule.
Wow. So you're basically shifting the dynamic from a partnership to a hierarchy.
Yes.
The king has spoken. To the beach we go.
Right.
And nobody wants to be friends with a dictator.
No.
But if I don't say what I want, we're back to being passive. So the alternative presented in the source material is replacing I want with I'd rather. As in, I'd rather go to the beach.
What's fascinating here is how that immediately diffuses the threat response.
Just that tiny change.
Just that change. By saying, I'd rather, you are implicitly acknowledging that there are multiple options on the table.
Oh.
And you are simply establishing a relative valuation system. You're saying, of the options available, my preference leans in this direction.
It's placing weight on a scale rather than dropping an anvil on the table.
That's a great way to put it.
You maintain your agency, you express a crystal clear preference, but you completely remove the authoritarian tone. You're still a team player.
Exactly.
But let's follow the logical progression here. Let's say I use my non-threatening tone. I'd rather.
Okay.
I say, I'd rather go to the beach. And you say, I'd rather go shopping.
Right.
We have asserted our preferences beautifully.
Very healthy.
And we are still completely deadlocked.
Which is the exact moment where most relationships retreat into the concept of fairness.
Ugh, the compromise trap. Finding the middle ground. Now, I have to challenge this premise because since kindergarten, we are told that compromise is the bedrock of a functioning society.
Sure.
Like if I want a luxury resort and you want a cheap hostel, we find a mid-tier hotel. We meet halfway. Why is this considered a trap?
Because we conflate fairness with satisfaction.
Oh, wait. Say that again?
We conflate fairness with satisfaction.
Right.
To understand why compromise often ruins plans, we have to look at the Abilene paradox.
The Abilene paradox.
Yes. It's a sociological phenomenon where a group of people collectively decide on a course of action that is counter to the preferences of many or all of the individuals in the group.
Oh, that sounds like every family vacation ever.
Right. And the source material uses a brilliant practical version of this. The Mexican food analogy.
Oh, this scenario is so painfully real. Walk us through it.
Okay, imagine you and a friend are choosing a restaurant. You are absolutely craving Italian food, rich pasta, heavy garlic, red wine.
Sounds amazing.
Your friend, on the other hand, is desperately craving Japanese food, clean flavors, fresh sushi, rice.
Complete opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right. So you look at a map, you look at the options, and in the spirit of quote-unquote compromise and meeting exactly halfway geographically and culinarily, you both agree to go to a Mexican restaurant.
Because it's equidistant between Italian and Japanese.
Exactly. It's a completely different cuisine, but it feels fair because neither person got their primary wish.
Right.
No one won, therefore no one lost. But what is the actual outcome?
The outcome is you're both sitting there eating tacos. You are secretly wishing it was ravioli, and your friend is wishing it was a spicy tuna roll.
Yep.
The outcome is lose-lose. Nobody is satisfied.
Precisely. You achieved fairness by guaranteeing mutual dissatisfaction.
Wow.
And this highlights a profound truth about human interaction. Compromise should not be about choosing something mediocre that everyone dislikes just for the sake of symmetry.
Symmetry is overrated.
It is. Compromise is about finding an option that both people can genuinely accept and enjoy. Sometimes meeting halfway makes zero logical sense.
No sense at all.
Sometimes one person's preference simply matters more on that specific day, or you just take turns getting exactly what you want.
Right. If it's your birthday, we aren't compromising on Mexican food. We're getting sushi. And I'll enjoy it because I value your happiness.
Exactly. That's a healthy dynamic.
But this brings up a much deeper layer to the planning nightmare. Because we aren't always just negotiating what we prefer to do. We are constantly slamming into the reality of what we can do.
Yep.
We have to separate preferences from constraints.
And this is where most group chats truly fall apart.
Oh, big time.
People attempt to negotiate constraints as if they were preferences.
Let's define the difference clearly for the listener.
Okay.
A preference is a desire. It's fluid. I prefer Italian, but I can survive Japanese.
Right.
A constraint is a hard, non-negotiable limit. Time, money, distance, and my absolute favorite example, food allergies.
Oh, yes.
If I prefer Italian, but you have a severe peanut allergy, and the Thai place uses peanut oil, your allergy is not a preference for me to negotiate against.
No, it's not.
I don't get to say, well, I really want pad thai, so let's meet halfway and you just eat around the peanuts.
Exactly. A constraint fundamentally terminates the negotiation on that specific variable.
It's a hard stop.
Yes. When you confuse the two, you disrespect the other person's boundary.
Oh, that's so true.
If someone has a strict budget constraint of $50 and you treat it as a preference, pushing them to spend $80, you aren't negotiating anymore. You are applying financial pressure.
Which leads to the cognitive overload of what I like to call the spreadsheet moment.
The spreadsheet moment, I love that.
We've all been there. You just want a fun weekend getaway with 4 friends. But the variables just start colliding.
Oh, yeah.
Friend A works late and can't leave until Saturday morning. That's a time constraint.
Yep.
Friend B can only afford 2 nights budget constraint.
Right.
Friend C flat out refuses to sleep on an air mattress comfort constraint.
Suddenly you need a literal spreadsheet.
Exactly. Suddenly, your brain is trying to solve a multivariable calculus equation just to figure out if you can leave the house.
And the thing is, the human working memory can only hold about 4 to 7 pieces of information at once.
Really? Just 4 to 7?
That's it. So when you throw 10 constraints into a text thread, cognitive overload is guaranteed.
The brain just short circuits.
It quite literally shuts down, which is why people start abandoning the chat or snapping at each other.
So what's the fix?
The first operational step out of this chaos is isolating the flexible variables from the hard constraints. You have to gather data.
And once again, the language we use to provide that data is critical. We can't use the passive, I don't care. We need phrases that communicate flexibility actively.
Yes, active flexibility.
Like, either works for me, or I'm fine with either.
Because these phrases are functional. They signal to the group. You do not need to factor this specific variable into your mental math. Build the plan around other constraints.
It removes a variable from the equation.
Exactly. However, there is a massive behavioral warning sign attached to a very similar phrase.
Oh, which one?
It's up to you.
The danger of it's up to you. Oh man, this is where we have to talk about tone and micro expressions.
Because the text on a screen completely strips away the emotional payload.
It really does. Because if we are standing in my kitchen figuring out dinner, and I look at you with a relaxed posture, a smile, and say, hey, it's up to you, that is a social gift.
It is.
I am literally handing you the reins.
It implies genuine flexibility and trust. It signals that your positive face, your desire to be agreeable and cooperative, is active.
But if we've been arguing in that same kitchen for 20 minutes, and I cross my arms, drop my eye contact, let out a heavy sigh, and say, fine, it's up to you.
Oof.
The vocabulary is identical, but the meaning is entirely inverted.
Totally. The prosody, the rhythm and pitch of your voice, along with your body language, fundamentally rewires the sentence.
Rewires it completely.
In that context, it means, I am deeply fatigued by this negotiation. I'm withdrawing my emotional labor, and I am secretly expecting you to cater to my unstated preference.
And if they guess wrong,
If you guess wrong, I will hold it against you.
it's passive aggression masquerading as flexibility.
Exactly.
It's the trapdoor all over again. And it proves that listening for tone or reading the emotional subtext of a text message is just as important as the vocabulary. You have to gauge the other person's actual buy-in.
And measuring buy-in is incredibly difficult.
It's like reading tea leaves sometimes.
But we can look at a brilliant distinction in how people measure their own commitment to an idea using 2 specific markers: open to versus willing to.
This is fascinating because I think most people, myself included, just use these interchangeably.
Most people do.
But if we break down the psychology, they represent totally different phases of decision-making.
Think of it as a spectrum of behavioral commitment. Let's say the group suggests changing the entire itinerary of a trip to go hike a mountain instead of visiting museums.
Big change.
If I say, I'm open to the hiking idea, what am I actually communicating?
What are you communicating?
I'm communicating a willingness to process the idea. I am keeping the door ajar.
Right.
I haven't agreed, but I haven't initiated a defensive block. I'm inviting you to pitch me the benefits.
I like to think of open to as leaving an item in your online shopping cart.
That's a great metaphor.
You're browsing, you're considering the price, the fit, the reviews, but no money has changed hands. You are entirely uncommitted.
That is a perfect analogy. Now contrast that with I'm willing to.
Okay? If I say, I'm willing to skip the museums and do the hike, I have shifted from processing to execution.
Execution.
It implies that while this may not have been my primary preference, I am prepared to concede and actually do the work.
So willing to is clicking the buy button.
Exactly.
You've entered your credit card information. The transaction is happening.
Yep.
Understanding the gap between those 2 states when someone is just considering an idea versus when they are actually committing to it can save friendships.
It really can.
Because if you think I'm willing to go hiking just because I said I was open to it, you're going to start booking non-refundable trail passes while I'm still just weighing my options.
Right. And when you back out, they feel betrayed.
Massively betrayed.
Mismatched expectations regarding commitment are a primary driver of interpersonal conflict.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the moment where conflict is almost unavoidable. The moment of rejection.
The dreaded rejection. When someone proposes an idea that severely violates your preferences or constraints, the natural human instinct is to immediately shoot it down.
It's a reflex.
Right. You say, let's do a 3-hour drive to the coast this Saturday. And my brain immediately pictures sitting in weekend traffic, my back hurting, wasting my one day off in a car. My instinct is just to say, no, I don't want to do that.
Which instantly erects a cognitive wall.
Right.
Bam. The collaborative architecture collapses, and you enter what negotiators call a zero-sum game, or binary gridlock.
Binary gridlock. I love that term.
It becomes my choice versus your choice. Yes or no, win or lose.
And nobody wants to lose.
Exactly. When humans perceive a situation as a zero-sum game, empathy plummets and defensive entrenchment skyrockets.
You feel like you have to defend your boundary, and they feel like they have to attack it to get what they want. So how do we break that binary gridlock without just, giving in?
This is where we want to talk about creating option C.
Using the magic of what if.
Yes. What if acts as a cognitive circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker.
It interrupts the brain's rapid descent into a win-lose binary. Instead of outright rejecting the drive to the coast, you modify the variables.
How so?
You say, what if we booked an Airbnb and stayed the night so we aren't driving 6 hours in one day? Or what if we went to the lake that's only 40 minutes away instead?
You're introducing a third, fourth, or completely different dimension to the problem?
Exactly. You are transitioning the interaction from a battle of wills back into a brainstorming session.
It totally shifts the energy.
By saying, what if, you signal to the other person, I heard your underlying desire. You want water and nature, and I validate that desire.
Right. Validation is key.
However, the current logistical parameters conflict with my constraints. Let us collaboratively build a new version of your idea.
It preserves their dignity while protecting your boundaries.
Precisely.
It's so collaborative. It keeps the energy moving forward. But let's be real. Sometimes you can't what if your way out of a bad idea.
Sure.
Sometimes a friend suggests something that you find fundamentally unappealing, and you just have to say no.
It happens.
And this brings us into the most treacherous territory of social planning. Polite rejection and the that's interesting minefield.
Oh, this trap is deeply rooted in our evolutionary psychology.
Let's get into the evolution of it.
For early humans, being ostracized from the tribe meant certain death on the savannah.
Literal death.
Right. We are biologically wired to fear social rejection, and by extension, we fear inflicting social rejection on our peers.
So we avoid it at all costs.
We hate saying no because it feels like a threat to the tribe's cohesion.
So we lie.
We do.
We use polite, socially acceptable lies. A friend pitches an idea. Let's say they want to go to an interactive, immersive theater experience where the actors pull audience members up on stage.
Oh, wow.
To me, an introverted person, that sounds like an actual nightmare.
A waking nightmare.
But I look at their excited face, and my evolutionary brain screams, don't hurt their feelings.
Protect the tribe.
Exactly. So I nod slowly, put on a fake smile, and say, wow, that's interesting.
It is the most dangerous phrase you can utter.
It's a loaded gun.
It really is. Depending on the micro expressions, the tension in your jaw, the widening of your eyes, that's interesting, can either be a genuine expression of curiosity, or it can be a desperate, socially sanctioned code for, I absolutely hate that idea with every fiber of my being.
And the trap is entirely on you.
Yes.
Because if they don't pick up on your secret code because they are blinded by their own enthusiasm, they think you actually like it.
They assume your positive face is engaged.
So they go ahead and buy the non-refundable tickets.
And now you are locked into an event you despise.
Yes. And you will likely radiate negative energy the entire night, which ruins their experience.
Definitely.
You resent them for dragging you there, and they resent you for ruining the night, all because you prioritized a momentary illusion of harmony over truthful communication.
It's a time bomb of resentment.
So we need alternative formulas. We need language that allows for actual polite disagreement. How do we reject the idea without triggering that primal fear of rejecting the person?
The most effective framework is to pivot away from judging the idea and instead center your own limitations.
Center your limitations.
Okay, the sources offer great examples of this. Instead of the fake, that's interesting, you use I statements.
Give me some examples.
You say, I'm not sure that's the best option for me, or I can see why you'd suggest that, but I'd prefer something else.
Let's apply this to a tangible scenario, because the difference in phrasing is night and day.
Okay.
Suppose a friend suggests a very expensive Michelin star restaurant for a casual catch-up dinner, and you are currently trying to save money.
A common scenario.
If I react by focusing on their choice, I might say, that place is way too expensive. Why does that cause a fight?
Because it is inherently judgmental.
Judgmental.
It implies an objective truth that the restaurant is overpriced, and by extension, it implies that your friend is foolish, financially irresponsible, or out of touch for suggesting it.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that.
You have attacked their judgment, they will immediately become defensive.
Right, they might snap back, well, it's a special occasion, or I just wanted to do something nice.
And now you're fighting.
Now we're arguing about money and values instead of just picking a place to eat.
Exactly.
So the technique is to center your own situation. I turn the lens back on myself.
Right.
I say, that menu looks amazing, but it's a little outside my budget this month. Or, I'd rather not spend that much this weekend, if that's okay.
By centering your own limits, whether it's your budget, your energy levels, or your dietary needs, you remove all judgment from the equation.
It's just about me.
You aren't saying the restaurant is bad. You are saying your current parameters don't align with it.
This allows the other person to pivot gracefully without losing face.
Exactly. They can simply say, oh, totally understand, let's find a cheaper spot.
You rejected the plan, not the person.
Which is the ultimate goal.
It's brilliant. But let's scale this up, because rejecting one person is hard enough. What happens when we take all these psychological triggers, passivity, constraints, defensive responses, and multiply them by 6? Surviving the group chat.
Group dynamics exponentially increase the cognitive load and the potential for perceived slights.
So here is the nightmare scenario. You are planning a group trip. 4 people want to leave on Friday. 2 people firmly want to leave on Saturday.
Okay.
The immediate democratic instinct of almost every group is to say, okay, let's just put it to a vote.
Natural instinct.
And yet, behavioral psychology tells us this is a terrible idea. Why is voting bad? Democracy is good.
You're right. In a macro political system, democracy is the most functional model we have.
Sure.
But in a microsocial setting, like a friendship group, majority rules voting creates an immediate structure of winners and losers. It creates a disenfranchised minority.
Because if 4 people vote for Friday and 2 vote for Saturday, Friday wins.
Right.
But what if the 2 people who voted for Saturday didn't just prefer Saturday? What if they voted for Saturday because they work late on Friday and literally cannot make it?
Exactly. By voting, you may have just forced the minority into a plan that violates their hard constraints.
You've cornered them.
They are now faced with a choice. Either endure extreme hardship to participate or withdraw from the trip entirely.
Both of which suck.
Both outcomes damage the social fabric. Instead of voting, a group must rely on constraint-identifying questions.
You act as a mediator.
Yes.
You ask questions like, is leaving on Friday essential for anyone? Or, how flexible is everyone with taking an extra day off? You're scanning the group for landmines before you take a step.
You are distinguishing between preferences and constraints.
Okay, lay that out.
If the Friday people just want to maximize their vacation time, but the Saturday people cannot leave early, then Friday is a preference and Saturday is a constraint.
And the constraint always wins.
The constraint must dictate the logistical framework.
But what if you are the easygoing person in the group? You're listening to this and thinking, I really don't have a hard constraint, but I don't want to fall into the passive, I'm fine with anything trap either.
Right. You need a bridge.
There is a specific phrase that acts as the perfect bridge here. It is the concept of the slight preference.
I slightly prefer the first option, but I'm happy with either.
I cannot emphasize enough how much heavy lifting that single sentence does in a chaotic group chat.
It is incredibly efficient data transfer.
Data transfer, yeah.
By stating a slight preference, you give the group a sense of direction, a tiebreaker, if you will, without applying any emotional pressure.
It's brilliant.
It says to the group, if all other variables are equal, let's lean toward option A. But if anyone has a hard constraint against option A, I will seamlessly adapt to option B without any resentment.
It provides guidance without dictation.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate team player move.
Yeah.
So let's look at the multivariable equation that represents the final boss of group planning.
The final boss. Let's hear it.
Let's say you have a group of 5. Person A wants a bustling city trip with nightlife. Person B wants to be completely isolated in a cabin in the woods.
Complete opposites.
Right. Person C has a strict budget and wants it as cheap as possible. Person D wants high-end luxury comfort. And person E absolutely refuses to wake up before 11 a.m.
Wow. Okay.
How do you solve that?
You don't.
You don't.
At least not if you're using the wrong definition of success. This is where we have to fundamentally redefine the goal of group planning.
Because the perfect plan doesn't exist.
The perfect plan, defined as a scenario where every single participant has 100% of their desires met simultaneously, is a mathematical impossibility in a diverse group.
This unicorn.
If you strive for perfection, you will end up in a perpetual feedback loop of anxiety.
The doom loop.
Everyone asks, what do you want? Everyone else answers, I don't mind, trying to accommodate the others.
Round and round we go.
You sit in that loop until the cognitive load becomes too great, someone snaps and aggressively mandates a terrible plan just to end the agony.
The absolute worst outcome. So if perfection is impossible, what is the goal?
The true goal of social coordination is a workable plan.
A workable plan. Just hearing that phrase lowers my blood pressure. It takes all the pressure off.
A workable plan is a solution that realistically functions within the bounds of everyone's constraints and is acceptable to everyone, even if it is nobody's absolute ideal.
So for our chaotic group of 5, a workable plan might mean renting a comfortable but affordable Airbnb on the absolute outskirts of a mid-sized city near a state park.
Right, you compromise on the extremes.
And you agree that mornings are unstructured so the late sleeper can sleep and the early risers can go get coffee. Nobody gets their extreme luxury or their extreme isolation, but nobody's hard limits are violated.
Exactly. It's a structure built on negotiated realities rather than perfect fantasies.
That is so freeing.
It requires empathy, clear communication of constraints, and the willingness to accept good enough for the sake of shared experience.
Good enough. But of course, even the most meticulously negotiated workable plan is vulnerable to the real world.
Oh, reality always gets a vote.
Because the universe loves to throw a wrench in the gears. This brings us to when things go wrong. Rethinking and playing it by ear.
A crucial skill.
Let's say you did everything right. You identified constraints, you used gentle suggestions, you created a workable plan to go on a beautiful outdoor hike.
Beautiful.
You wake up on Saturday and there is a torrential downpour.
The variables have changed.
The variables have changed.
The environment has introduced a new, non-negotiable constraint. This is where cognitive flexibility becomes paramount.
Okay, so what do we do?
You need phrasing that allows for a rapid pivot without assigning blame. A highly effective natural phrase is, looks like the weather isn't on our side, or maybe we should rethink the plans.
I love the word rethink there.
Why is that?
It implies that the core intention, the desire to spend time together, is still intact. We're just applying that intention to a new logistical reality.
Yes. We aren't canceling, we are adapting.
Adapting, which naturally leads to an idiom that everyone throws around when plans get messy. Let's play it by ear.
Playing it by ear.
It's a classic. Playing it by ear implies deciding how to proceed organically as a situation develops, rather than adhering to a rigid, predetermined schedule.
It requires a high tolerance for ambiguity.
It's a great vibe. Hey, the weather is weird. Nobody knows what they want to do. Let's just meet at the cafe at noon and play it by ear. It feels incredibly relaxed, but I feel like there's a danger here too.
There is a severe contextual warning required for this idiom.
Okay, lay it on us.
Playing it by ear is wonderful for uncertain weather on a casual weekend with close, highly adaptable friends.
Low stakes.
Exactly. It is absolutely disastrous for organizing anything that requires structural security.
Oh, I can just imagine. Getting an email for a 500-person corporate conference or a wedding that says, we aren't sure what time the keynote speaker is arriving or when dinner is, so let's all just play it by ear.
Total panic. Absolute chaos.
People need predictability in high-stakes environments. Context is everything.
Always. The language you use must match the required level of certainty.
So match the stakes.
High stakes require high certainty and clear directives. Low stakes, like a rainy Saturday with a friend, benefit from the relaxed ambiguity of playing it by ear.
Okay. As we start to pull all of these complex psychological and linguistic threads together, the grand synthesis of our deep dive today,
Let's do it.
what we've really discovered looking through the mechanisms of human interaction is that we aren't actually bad at making decisions.
No, we make thousands of micro decisions every single day.
What we are bad at is expressing our preferences to the people we care about.
Yes.
Because we are terrified of being perceived as demanding, selfish, or burdensome to the tribe.
We utilize linguistic passivity phrases like, I'm fine with anything, as a shield against potential conflict.
Right. We try to hide our desires to protect the relationship.
But as we've seen, that passivity creates an information vacuum that actually generates much deeper conflict and resentment down the road.
The trap door.
Language, specifically the nuanced pragmatics we've discussed today, acts as the bridge.
It's the safety net. It is the middle ground between being a completely passive doormat and being an overly demanding dictator.
Exactly. Healthy communication in these scenarios is an iterative, cyclical process.
Iterative.
You suggest gently to avoid anchoring bias. You listen to the response to gauge momentum.
Right.
You negotiate the variables using relative preferences. You rigorously adjust for hard constraints. And eventually, you commit.
And the right phrasing, I'd rather, what if, I'm open to, greases the wheels of that entire cognitive process.
It absolutely does.
So here's a final thought I want to leave you with, something to just mull over the next time you find yourself staring at a group chat, feeling that familiar paralysis over choosing between Thai or Indian food.
The pizza dilemma.
Exactly. If our immense, almost comical difficulty in simply picking a restaurant stems from this deep-seated evolutionary fear of being a burden to our friends, what does that actually say about how secure we really feel in those relationships?
Oh, that's deep.
Right. Maybe the next time you drop the protective shield of, I'm fine with anything, and confidently say, actually, I have a slight preference for this option. You aren't just saving everyone 30 minutes of agonizing text messages.
No, you're doing much more.
You're actually practicing relationship trust.
Wow.
You are trusting that your friends care enough about you to value your preference. And you are trusting that your bond is strong enough to survive a minor disagreement over dinner.
A profound psychological reframing.
Thank you.
Trusting the foundation of the relationship enough to be visible and honest within it.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this custom deep dive today and letting us get a little philosophical about your weekend plans.
It's been fun.
We hope you feel armed with the psychological insight and the linguistic tools to tackle that next group chat.
Absolutely.
Go out there, identify those constraints, use the right words at the right moment, and please don't be afraid to tell your friends what you actually want to eat.
It's been an absolute pleasure analyzing this with you. Keep questioning those underlying social dynamics.
We'll catch you next time. Take care of yourself out there.